diversification, at least geographic diversification of where the training facilities are, but also of where the jobs are.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think certainly among our undergraduates at Wellesley, the minority students often were just expected to be home because of the familial, relationship and situation. And so the REUs that we had and other forms of summer support weren't as helpful for them because they wanted to be near home, which was usually Southern California, Texas. So I agree very much that makes a huge difference if we could put the money where the students are in some of these programs. It would certainly help because then they can stay part of the family unit during those break periods, but also take advantage of the opportunities. So I do think that's critical, and the childcare thing is huge. Whoops. Feedback from someone.
Baccalaureate degree.
That's a strange
Feed from some other group.
If somebody has a course that is deemed to have 3/4 of the material, but they want to transfer it into a school where 1/4
user
is missing.
I don't know who that is.
Just somebody that we adopt something that
Let me go look.
Wow.
Everybody hear that?
I can't hear you, Gretchen.
Yeah. Unmute. I don't know.
I'm not muted.
Oh, okay, good. I can hear you now.
Okay. So I'm having difficulty hearing, and I'm just wondering, is somebody taking notes? That's a dangerous question to ask because I think that means I'm going to be taking notes. Okay, I'm taking notes. But I didn't hear the last speaker at all.
Oh, sorry. You can hear me now?
I can. I heard you,
Okay.
but then I heard some weird NSF user.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that individual's gone, I guess. So you did hear me?
I did hear you. So
Okay,
that's
good.
great. So I got geography, childcare, put money where students are. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing that I was thinking about as I was reading the report was actually more direct K-12 kinds of programs. I didn't see a lot of that in the report. And it seems like from the four-year college situation, and even I visit community colleges as part of the foundation work, that by the time students make a decision to go to post-secondary school, they already have a pretty good idea of what they think they want to do. And so the teacher programs are clearly really relevant and important. But in fact, probably the reason I'm a scientist, I had some kind of an NSF sort of fellowship during the summer when I was a high school kid. And I had considered myself a humanities person. And it was a program disseminated by the institution. So kind of like an REU, but with high school kids. And so I participated. It was a neuroscience program even. And I'm 95% sure that's why I'm who I am now, is because of that early intervention. Otherwise, I'm absolutely sure I would have become I was an English major, but I tacked science on, and that ended up being what I wanted to do. So I think there's some more direct funding at the student level that I didn't see a lot of that in the report. Maybe I missed something, but it seems like that's a really potentially critical component. I mean, it's expensive because it's one-on-one. You support one student at a time where the teacher influences, expand. And I can see why the teacher stuff is important, but it seems like maybe some targeted summer programs in areas where there's a particular population that would benefit might be very helpful. And that was a question I wanted to ask, was whether there was something hiding in there that was like that. And I just don't know. I didn't see it. Did anybody else?
No, and I think that's a great suggestion about the summer REU. And then I just wanted to throw in here something else that I didn't see, and it's something that I didn't really see much of yesterday either. And that is programs that I would associate with sort of higher scale environmental type programs. And I realize that there are other directorates at NSF that do that, but I also believe that bio has a role to play. For instance, and here I could even tie in tribal colleges and the news about a recent paper about fire and the role of climate change in causing wildfire. And the more you know actually about the trees and the forest, you can learn about the resilience there. I understand that forestry isn't part of bio, but forest resilience, I think, is, and tree resilience and the tree components. And so I think that basically the bioeconomy is missing a whole area, and that's what I would consider to be the environmental area. And I do know that there are lots of undergraduates who are really interested now because they're scared and they really want to go into environmental work. And I think that they're part of the bio workforce. And I think they're, in particular, they would be part of the bio workforce in communities that are most at risk. And that would include, that could certainly include tribal communities. It could certainly include, low-lying areas in urban environments, and they tend to be under-resourced as well. So I think that basically this is a group that needs to be brought in.
As you were talking about that, I was also thinking about the presentation that we just had about the community colleges. So we talk about skill set development and workforce development. Community colleges and technical colleges have been really good at this because that's what the students go there for. I think four-year institutions, when we talk to students, we're not really thinking about the workforce development in specific skill sets. And when you compare it goes back to that regional aspect too, right? So the example we had today was about, if you talk about the bio workforce and you are surrounded by biotech companies in terms of access, whether community college partners with the biotech companies, you get a very different output than when you're in an area where there are no biotech companies or startups. So there'll be no, whether you have a community college in that area, there will be no student or partnership to actually provide those biotechnic skills to those students. So it goes back to that question is, how do we develop this workforce with equity across board rather than have these little pockets where you have these partnerships between the biotech companies and the community colleges? Well, one other thing also that struck me, I forgot to say this, is about, they talked about a curriculum change. We know at four-year institutions and universities, curriculum changes, it takes almost a year if you're lucky to get it done, right? So as the workforce changes so quickly, how do we, especially in computer science, we know things change really quickly in that aspect. How do you change the curriculum that fast? I mean, that's a huge bottleneck in academia that has been there for a long time. So it goes back to that idea, how do we change the way our system works in order to address these issues?
It seems like one support for that would be to have tenure track faculty lines for individuals who are doing pedagogical research in STEM. And at least at Wellesley, we've been denied that kind of hire several times now, even though they consider themselves to be a teaching intensive school. I don't know if some of your faculties have pedagogy experts. I think all schools could use them at the moment because our student bodies are changing so rapidly, and we have a whole different population that's coming in and also that experienced the pandemic. They don't necessarily have the same types of skills that the that the students had, let's say, 10 years ago. And I really felt lost at times with some of the challenges in the classroom. And, you know, there were some supports on campus for this kind of thing. But it still feels like having an integral faculty member who is actually involved in progress in terms of pedagogy would be a really good place to start in some cases. But I don't know how to encourage institutions to include pedagogy in their science departments. You know, I think they want to always delegate it to an education department, but then the communication lines aren't as good as if they were integral to the science departments itself. I don't know how the rest of you feel, if it would work in your departments, but I think it's pretty pervasive that science pedagogy research doesn't. There's one school, Rollins College, actually does have a pedagogy faculty member who interacted a lot with us in the foundation work I do. And it made a huge difference in how those faculty are responding to the current challenges.
Yeah, I feel that, you know, now I'm trying to push this through to the faculty. Like, one of the challenges that we have is, for instance, quantitative skills. You know, they get into a course and the course tends to be structured in a particular way. It requires a commitment of the entire semester. And also the other thing that we face is that the skills of students that come in are very uneven. So some students will have like really good coding skills, others have never written a line of code. And so, you know, I'm trying to see, you know, testing different things and doing these boot camps. So we have, you know, essentially just open it up. So we're going to teach, you know, a 2-day boot camp, just like basic data management and graphics. And we are having students, actually graduate students, lead some of these workshops to try to just bring students to a certain level. But I feel that a lot of these skills, they're best learned, especially these hands-on things. It could be done modularly. It's just that the university structure doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And this is the European model. A lot of the, especially PhDs, they have these short courses that they go and they learn some competency, you know, for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And we're, you know, sort of shackled to this semester structure or trimester structure, which is just not ideal for what we want to do.
It's funny, in our graduate program, in the last few years, we've flipped a lot from term or semester-long courses to modules within, you know, so multiple modules within a term. And so in some ways, the graduate education is more progressive than the undergraduate education. But I can't imagine how many years it would take to get something like a module concept through for the undergraduates. Because we have the same problem Kennedy mentioned. I mean, you want a new course, put it in now, and then hopefully it'll stumble over the finish line so you can introduce it next year.
I think students are interested in that as well because, I mean, Colorado College, of course, has a modular kind of curriculum, you know, from the beginning. And I just visited a school, what was it, Cornell College, is that Iowa, I think, where they also have that. And the students that we met, they went there because of those programs. So the students are looking for that kind of immersive experience, I think. And so it would probably be a popular, you know, thing if we could manage it. And they even did organic chemistry in a modular way. I couldn't figure out how, you know, but they had 6-week modules and how you do that. And they were ACS certified. So somehow it passed muster in the chem department as well. So it's possible. I just don't know how to get all of us to agree with it.
Yeah, that's the way I did actually my first semester of OChem, and I forgot it in 6 weeks as well. I just want to point out that when you learn something that quickly, you can forget it very quickly too. But I think that actually this does go to what Kennedy brought up, and then each of you also are talking about. One thing we could do and is have a course that's on the book, so no curricular change needed, but incorporated into the course are, you know, just visiting faculty. And the visiting faculty can be people from industry. They can be people from, you know, organizations. And as long as they're people who are, you know, carefully vetted by the faculty in charge and everything else, it's a great resource. And one assumes that they would come in with better knowledge of what their particular line of work requires and what are the opportunities, et cetera. So that can work.
You know, just talking about that, you know, we do have I know we have a course, special topics, which can be anything. The problem is only seniors are allowed to take that course, right? So, so it doesn't still solve the problem that we're talking about, whereby you're only allowing us seniors and some of our juniors to take it, where they need to take it much earlier.
People who've already made decisions about the career, yeah.
I think that takes us back to something that one of us mentioned. I can't remember who, maybe it was you, Gretchen. The importance of the K through 12 and getting people thinking about this is understanding that this is a viable career option earlier, because you know that would presumably lead to a different focus of efforts in high school. But that seems to me that it's an essential part of this, is just to get effectively the word out that this is a viable career option and have people start thinking about that earlier.
Yeah, I really like Barbara's idea of REUs for K through 12. I mean, I realize that it is labor intensive, but at least you can enlarge the cohort. I mean, beyond one-on-one, certainly, and it can be a little bit less full-bodied, I guess, than an REU, but still, it would be enough to expose students to something they hadn't considered.
Yeah, what I did was definitely a cohort model, and I think it was only 5 weeks long. It wasn't you know, and I think the other thing it overcomes is the science identity problem that we have, the STEM identity, that a student would feel accepted by that area. If it appeals to them, they would already feel like they had a foothold. And that's something we work so hard at the undergraduate level to try to establish with students who haven't had much in the way of science experience, by attaching them to a lab when they first come. But again, it's students that are already expressing an interest in science. So doing it, you know, 4 years earlier or whatever, however early, could maybe shift the pipeline coming into the undergraduate schools. And it seems like that would be one place we could expand the opportunities, at least, so that, yeah, when you start to lose students, some are always going to, you know, straggle off during undergraduate, but it won't be as desperate as a whole, because you'll start with a bigger group to begin with.
What were our other specific questions? Does anybody have it right there?
Yeah, so the first, I think we've been focused on, to me, what opportunities exist for building the workforce, what gaps, and I think we've been talking a lot about the gaps. And then the second question is about the bottlenecks, so the same questions basically as yesterday. Bottlenecks, I don't know, the only thing that came to mind to me was all the immigration problems we're having. And I know at least in Massachusetts, the governor just asked the federal government if they couldn't speed up, you know, approval, work approval for immigrants in Massachusetts, because everything from, you know, immigrants, adult immigrants finding work, to their children going to schools, getting settled and finding schools, all of that has been held up because of federal approvals. And so at least in Massachusetts, which certainly isn't the most immigration heavy state, but apparently there is a big problem getting the immigrants into the pipeline, which is not only the individuals looking for work, but finding a place to live and getting kids into school. So it seems like that would certainly help if that worked a little better.
And that's even legal immigrants, of course. It's people who are
Yeah.
here, legal, ready to go. and they
Yes,
come back.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting, you know, the least represented group in STEM, when you look at the statistics at a national level, are Hispanic women in terms of the proportion of the population, and the majority of these immigrants are Hispanic, coming from Latin America. I mean, in New York City, I've been working with this legal organization that are like trying to help people move through the legal system to get the paperwork, just as a translator, and it's just it's unbelievable, the paperwork. I mean, it makes sense, but there's just so many steps and so much need, and not enough people to, you know, to handle the volumes that the city is getting. It's really challenging, and I would love to, you know, like just the next step to get a job, but just to get them through the legal is not trivial.
Maria, can I ask you to clarify there? So do you mean at all levels entering the STEM workforce?
When you look at representation of different groups in STEM, in terms of the proportion of the total US population, the one that has the biggest gap, based on the NSF reports, is Hispanic women. I mean, this I could go on, you know, the many reasons why that might be, but yeah, it's kind of interesting, and we have, you know, a huge Hispanic population. I mean, it's just increasing day by day.
So, and suggestions, there would be more people to handle the paperwork. It's got to go beyond that, obviously. Yeah.
Well, I like for instance, what she said about things like, you know, childcare, offering people, you know, support to be able to manage their lives, and get an education, because that, I mean, we all know what the cost of childcare is, and it's prohibitive for many people.
Yeah, and it's not just cost, it's simply availability.
Yeah.
There's-
Well, and I would think expanding the RAMP program, you know, if you look at the RAMP, what's available online, you know, it's basically heavily impacting, it looks like maybe a half a dozen states, but it could be much broader. And the reasoning behind that is just that, at least in my experience, the students that are coming in from disadvantaged socioeconomic groups, they're working usually off campus. The campus jobs don't pay enough. So they work off campus. They really, really don't have time to be involved in research. And even if they are, it's not the kind of quality experience you'd want. And at most institutions, research is in addition to a course load. So it's not a very, very realistic experience either, because you're running around, you know, like crazy, and the students are. And so having students have an opportunity to stay on and do research after they graduate and do a post-bac kind of experience, I think could be really pivotal. And certainly with the students that we had in those programs during the pandemic, at Wellesley, they all ended up in graduate programs, you know, pretty quickly after those experiences, and they were all minority kids. So it seems like that's a really successful program for students already in the pipeline. I'm not sure, I guess it's not really a gap because it exists, and it's not really a bottleneck, other than we could do more, I guess. We know it works.
And to the point that Kennedy made about, I think the geography is really, really important. And I don't know, I mean, like they show those examples. Of course, Southern California is like one of the meccas of biotech, as is Boston. But then in these other areas, geographic areas, what, you know, is there, for instance, we talk about, you know, climate change and agriculture yesterday was being one of the focal areas. Can we train students in sort of like the technical aspects of agriculture? Are there jobs in that area? So just target them to the business that occur in that particular area. I think that would be really important.
Yeah, there are great jobs in remote sensing for agriculture now. Also, there are model programs that using STEM grants, or STEM, I guess is what it's called now from the NSF, where you take students who are, need full financial aid, and so basically you give them additional aid so they don't have to work off campus. Instead,
Right.
they can work at research. And so basically it's just be like a summer stipend or something like that. So that can be targeted just for a research program so that they don't have to do that off-campus work, and yet can focus on
Those are great, and the yield is amazing from those programs, both finishing school and going into STEM fields. That wasn't listed under bio, but I could swear STEM bio has a piece of that, don't they?
I think so.
Yeah.
I was just looking, actually. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Let me look.
I mean, to make those stipends sort of functionally equivalent to working, they need to be large. There needs to be because they gotta, whatever money they were making, and then there's got to be housing if they're going to stay on for an extra term or whatever. And so it's really important that you can't nickel and dime those things. You have to make it competitive with their other activities so that it's sort of the equivalent of childcare. You got to provide enough funds for them to live and make whatever allocation they needed for next year's tuition.
Yeah.
I think that's so true because you have to provide the wraparound services, right? So if students are already coming from disadvantaged situations, that means they need all kinds of support. And you're right, most of the students, the MSIs, some of them already have, they're in college, they have children, they have coming from, they don't have the support. So it's a decision about, do I go work in a lab and get paid only maybe $8 an hour, or do I go work at some retail place and get paid more to provide the support? So I think one of the barriers is really providing the wraparound services for the students to encourage them to stay in STEM.
That's a good term, Kennedy. I hadn't heard it called wraparound services before, but I'm going to remember that and use it.
Well, DO, Department of Education offers a Gear Up program, and that's what it does for K through 12 kids, right? It provides wraparound services, everything from anything you can think about any kid in an area in a poverty school system would need, and they're allowed to do that. So that's where I picked that term from.
It is STEM is directly associated with EDU, Division of Undergraduate Education. So bio doesn't
do it.
Doesn't do it.
Just one other consideration with programs like the STEM, and that is you don't have enough for everybody, because as Kennedy points out, it has to be a substantial sum for anybody to actually be able to do it rather than work, at a fast food place. So how do you select? I think that's another one, is how do you get people into the pipeline? And I realize that income is easy, and you definitely, but still you're still left with more people than you can serve. And so you have to somehow select, and I guess it has to be on the basis of some kind of promise, but I don't know, that's the part that feels hard for me, is who gets it and who doesn't get it.
It's funny, once you brought up STEM, I started looking because it felt like we should be. Definitively not.
Really? Okay,
Yeah,
well,
it doesn't,
maybe
yeah.
there's a line there.
There you go. I don't know. That's a really great
I mean,
question.
usually you guys all share around
It
this
does,
stuff, and
right?
so it's a little odd, but
Yeah,
I mean, it fits DUE, but
Yeah, but there's, yeah, and when you said it and you were explaining what it was, I went, that sounds great. And I started looking, no, something, a note has been taken.
So once we talked in the BioAC about a joint session with the Department of Education or the Directorate for Education, and it strikes me that with everything that we've said for the past 2 days about the development of the workforce, and now today in particular, I think a really right-minded emphasis on what happens even before in K through 12, it strikes me that a really good conversation could be had with it. Education people.
Did we identify bottlenecks beyond the immigration issue that we talked about?
What, perhaps one way of thinking about bottlenecks is what are the educational bottlenecks?
Yeah.
So obviously quantitative skills, math, stuff like that. And we hear over and over again that the science isn't well taught in the K through 12 situation often because it's taught by people who are already science phobic. And so that a real bottleneck again is the teacher, getting scientifically competent teachers to be teaching that and passing on their passion to the students.
All right, it is 11:19, and I think we are supposed to go to 11:20.
Okay, maybe in 60 seconds, I'm going to run through what we're going to say here. So basically, we talked about opportunities, right, and gaps in the report. We talked about their gaps being how to develop the workforce. Basically, geography seemed to be undermentioned. So it's important that these programs be located where the students are with the money, also more K through 12. I mentioned again maybe the lack of environmental jobs mentioned. We talked about praise for the community college ones, but the bio workforce, once again, it's not geography necessarily, but it has to be located where biotech companies are. We talked about curricular change being needed, but it's slow. Therefore, we talked about ways to bring in experts and speed up the process of bringing in new educational modules. Talked about the value of modules, educational bottlenecks. We talked about the need for quantitative skills, and we talked about immigration as another bottleneck in that just takes so long. We praised the report for its emphasis on childcare, but once again, if we really want to support people who need to be supported and brought into the pipeline, we're talking about a lot of money to take care of childcare, family, etc. And then finally, going back to K through 12, we would like to underline again just the need for more quantitative skills and better teacher training or teacher even recruitment. What did I leave out? Did I cover it?
Okay, yeah, that was good.
Okay. All right.
Let's head back to the room.
Okay.
All righty. Sorry about that.
All right.
I have to move again.
Yep.